There are moments in life when a single empty chair feels louder than a crowded room. For Emily, that empty chair had always belonged to her father. From her earliest school plays to her soccer tournaments and birthdays, she had grown used to scanning the audience, searching desperately for a familiar face that never appeared. Over the years, disappointment hardened into anger. She told herself he didn't care, that work or excuses always mattered more than she did. Now, standing at the edge of a new chapter, her high school graduation, Emily promised herself not to feel that ache again. She knew her mother would be there. Her friends' families would clap and cheer. But her father had stopped expecting anything from him a long time ago. Still, as she slipped on her cap and gown, there was a small, unspoken wish buried deep inside her heart. A wish she hated herself for holding on to that. Maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. But fathers like hers didn't change, did they? They didn't suddenly show up when they had missed so much already. Emily reminded herself to stay strong, to smile for the photos, to enjoy her big day without the shadow of his absence. And yet, what she didn't know was that her father had been carrying a secret of his own, a secret that had kept him away, that had eaten at his strength and his time. A secret he had hidden not because he didn't love her, but because he loved her too much to let her worry. On that graduation day, when Emily finally walked across the stage to receive her diploma, she would glance into the farthest row of the auditorium and everything she thought she knew about her father's love would begin to unravel. Emily's earliest memories of her father were not of bedtime stories or shared laughter, but of promises that quietly dissolved into silence. She remembered being 6 years old, nervously adjusting the cardboard crown she had made for the kindergarten play. Her classmates' parents filled the small auditorium, their cameras flashing as the children sang. She had searched the rows of folding chairs again and again, hoping to see her father's familiar frame. But when the curtain closed, her seat in the audience was still empty. Maybe he had to work late, her mother whispered, smoothing down Emily's costume as they walked to the car. Emily nodded, but inside, a seed of disappointment took root. Year after year, the pattern repeated. On her 8th birthday, Emily had invited her entire class to a backyard party. The balloons danced in the summer air, the cake waited on the table, and she saved a special seat for her father beside her. The guests laughed, the candles were blown out, but the chair remained empty. That night, she cried herself to sleep, clutching the unopened gift she had hoped to give him by the time she was 11. The disappointment had hardened into frustration. She played her first soccer tournament under gray autumn skies. As she scored her first goal, she looked toward the bleachers, heart pounding with pride. Mothers waved, fathers cheered, but the spot where her father should have been was blank. When the team posed for photos, Emily forced a smile, though inside she felt the sting of being alone. "Why doesn't he ever come?" she finally asked her mother one night. Her voice was sharp, tinged with both sadness and anger. Her mother hesitated before answering. "Your father, he works very hard, Emily. He loves you in his own way. Sometimes, love doesn't look like what we expect." But Emily couldn't understand. If he loved her, why wasn't he there when she needed him? Why did work always seem to come first? While her friends shared stories of fathers teaching them to ride bikes, helping with homework, or cheering from the sidelines, Emily's stories were filled with absence. As the years passed, she began to armor her heart. She stopped asking her mother why. She stopped saving an empty seat, and each time her father failed to appear, she quietly built another wall inside herself. Yet deep down, despite her anger, a small part of her still longed for him. She wanted him to show up just once, to look at her the way other fathers looked, at their daughters, with pride, with presence, with love she could see, not just imagine. That longing never went away. It only hid itself under layers of resentment, waiting for the day it would finally rise to the surface. High school was supposed to feel like a fresh start for Emily. But the shadows of her father's absence followed her into every new milestone. During her freshman year, she made the varsity soccer team, an achievement she had dreamed of for years. The first home game was filled with excitement. The bleachers buzzed with proud families holding banners and handmade signs. Emily played harder than ever, sprinting across the field with fire in her chest. She scored the winning goal in the final minutes, the crowd erupting in cheers. For a brief moment, her eyes instinctively darted to the stands, searching for the one face she still wished to see. But once again, his seat was empty. Her teammates ran into the arms of their parents, cameras capturing joyful embraces. Emily stood off to the side, gripping her water bottle, her smile fading. By the time she got home that night, her excitement had curdled into anger. Why can't he just show up once? She demanded of her mother. It's not like I'm asking for the world, I just want him to be there. For me, her mother sighed, her eyes heavy with something Emily couldn't quite name. Your father, he's tired, Emily. He works long hours. That's always the excuse, Emily shot back. Maybe work is more important than I am. Her mother didn't answer. And the silence felt louder than words. By sophomore year, Emily stopped expecting him altogether. She didn't tell him about games, concerts, or award ceremonies. She filled the void with friends, with late-night study sessions, with journals full of angry scribbles and poetry she never shared. But despite her attempts to bury her feelings, the wound deepened. At every school dance, every celebration, the sight of fathers spinning their daughters under bright lights or snapping pictures made her chest tighten. She convinced herself she didn't need him, that she was stronger without him. And yet, a tiny voice inside whispered otherwise. Junior year brought the state championship. The stands were louder than ever, filled with parents waving flags and wearing team colors. Emily had worked harder than she ever had, training in rain and heat to prove she belonged. When her team won the trophy, her coach raised her arm in victory. Reporters snapped photos, teammates lifted her onto their shoulders. But when she was lowered back down, her gaze swept the crowd. No father, no familiar eyes shining with pride. That night, when the celebrations had ended, she sat alone in her room, the gold medal heavy around her neck. Ripped it off, threw it onto her desk, and whispered through tears, "What's the point? If he'll never care." By senior year, her anger had hardened into something colder. Graduation was on the horizon, and though her mother reminded her gently, "This is your big day. Your father might surprise you," Emily scoffed. "Don't bother." "I don't want him there," she said bitterly. "He's missed everything else." "He doesn't get to suddenly pretend now." Her mother flinched at the sharpness in her tone, but didn't argue. The night before graduation, Emily sat on her bed, scrolling through photos of her classmates celebrating with their families. She wondered if they knew how lucky they were, or if they took those moments for granted. She clenched her fists, vowing not to let her father's absence ruin her day. She would walk across that stage. She would smile. She would hold her diploma. Hi. And she would do it without him, or at least that's what she thought. The morning of graduation dawned warm and bright, sunlight spilling across Emily's room like a spotlight. Her cap and gown hung neatly by the door, waiting for her. For weeks, she had rehearsed how she would feel. Strong, independent, proud. She told herself she didn't need anyone, least of all her father. But as she buttoned the navy gown and adjusted the tassel on her cap, her stomach knotted. She couldn't stop the small, stubborn ache that pulsed inside her, the same ache she had carried to every empty chair in her life. Her mother drove her to the ceremony. The car buzzed with nervous excitement. Emily's friends had filled social media with countdowns and selfies. But when her mother said softly, "Your father, maybe he'll come today," Emily shook her head. "Don't, Mom, please." Let's not pretend. Her mother fell silent, gripping the wheel a little tighter. The school auditorium was alive with chatter and music. Families waved proudly from their seats, fathers hoisting cameras, mothers dabbing at their eyes with tissues. The graduates filed in, caps bobbing, gowns swishing. The air electric with anticipation. Emily sat among her classmates. Her name printed neatly on the program she clutched in her lap. As the principal welcomed everyone, she tried to steady her heart. She reminded herself, "This is your moment. You don't need him." But as she glanced around, her eyes betrayed her. She scanned the rows of faces, the front filled with cheering. Parents, the middle crowded with siblings holding flowers, balloons swaying in the air. Each familiar embrace and joyful clap felt like a weight pressing against her chest when her friend Rachel spotted her parents in the second row and waved. Emily forced a smile, pretending not to care. Deep down, though, she hated how empty her own side of the auditorium felt without him. The ceremony moved quickly. Speeches from honor students, applause between names, the shuffle of gowns brushing against the floor. Emily's heart pounded louder with every step closer to her moment. Finally, her row was called. She stood, smoothed her gown, and walked toward the stage. Her pulse thundered in her ears as the principal called her name, Emily Carter. She climbed. The steps, her diploma waiting, the crowd clapping politely. She lifted her chin, reminding herself to smile for the camera. And then, almost without meaning to, her eyes drifted outward, across the sea of faces. And that was when she saw him, in the very last row, half hidden behind taller parents and restless children, sat her father. His posture was weary, his shoulders slightly slumped, but his eyes were locked on her. Not cold, not distant, but shining with pride, with love, with something that made her breath catch. He wasn't dressed for the occasion, no suit, no tie. Just his worn work clothes, his hands clasped tightly together in his lap. And yet, in that instant, seemed larger than anyone else in the room. Emily froze for a heartbeat on stage, the world around her blurring. All the years of anger, of longing, of whispered questions, suddenly they collided inside her. The diploma, pressed into her hand, felt almost unreal as she blinked against the sting of unexpected tears. Her father raised one hand, small, almost shy wave. His lips curved into a faint smile. And in that smile, Emily saw something she had been waiting for her entire life. Acknowledgement, presence, love made visible. She walked across the stage in a daze, her chest swelling with emotions she couldn't name. Relief, joy, and a piercing ache all at once. She had wanted this moment for so long that it didn't feel real. When she returned to her seat, Rachel whispered excitedly, "Was that your dad? I saw him. He's here." Emily nodded faintly, unable to form words. Her throat burned and she clutched the diploma like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. For the rest of the ceremony, her eyes kept drifting back to the farthest row, afraid he might vanish if she looked away. But he stayed still and steady, watching her with quiet pride. And for the first time in her life, Emily realized her father was truly there. When the final name was called and the crowd erupted into applause, the graduates tossed their caps in two, the air, laughter, and cheers echoing off the auditorium walls. Emily's cap flew upward, spun, and landed somewhere among the sea of navy fabric. For once, she didn't care. Her eyes were fixed only on the back row. She pushed through her classmates, past hugging families and flashing cameras, her heart racing. "Don't disappear. Please don't leave before I get to you," at the farthest edge of the crowd. She found him. Her father stood slowly from his chair, his frame thinner than she remembered, his face lined with exhaustion. For a moment, Emily froze, suddenly shy, suddenly unsure of how to bridge the distance that had stretched between them for years. "Dad." Her voice cracked as she said the word she hadn't spoken to him in what felt like forever. He turned, and his tired eyes softened. Emily, it was just her name, but it held weight. Like 1,000 unspoken apologies. "I didn't think you'd come," she whispered. "I couldn't miss it." He said simply, his voice low, rough at the edges. For a second, she wanted to demand answers. Why? He had missed every birthday, every game, every milestone. The questions clawed at her throat. But as she looked at him, something stopped her. The way his shoulders sagged, the slight tremor in his hands, he wasn't the strong, untouchable man she had painted in her mind. He looked fragile. Still, the years of hurt pressed forward. "You weren't there for anything else?" she said, her tone sharper than she intended. "Why now?" Her father lowered his gaze as if the floor had suddenly become unbearably heavy. "I know. I wasn't the father you wanted me to be. I know I missed too much." He paused, swallowing hard. "But I need you to believe that I was always proud of you, Emily. Every single day." She blinked, confusion mixing with anger. "Then why hide it?" "Why? Let me think you didn't care." His hands fidgeted, his voice nearly breaking. "'Cause I didn't want you to worry. I didn't want you to see me like this." "Like what?" she asked, her heart pounding. He hesitated, then gave a faint, weary smile. "Sick, tired, weak. I've been in and out of hospitals, Emily. Treatments, appointments. I didn't want to bring that into your life. I wanted you to focus on your future, not my failures." The words struck her like a blow. Suddenly, the empty chairs weren't signs of neglect, but of sacrifice, of quiet suffering hidden behind closed doors. She felt the anger inside her crumble, replaced by a sharp ache that brought tears to her eyes. All this time she whispered, her voice trembling, "You were sick." He nodded slowly. "And I'm sorry. Sorry for not telling you. Sorry for not being there the way you needed. But today I couldn't let myself miss this. Seeing you walk across that stage, it was worth everything." Emily's throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to cry, to tell him it wasn't fair that he had stolen those years from her. But when she looked into his tired eyes, all she could do was step forward and wrap her arms around him. For a long moment, they stood there, father and daughter clinging to each other in the middle of the noisy crowd. Their reunion, fragile but real. "I love you, Dad," she whispered into his shoulder. The words tasting both unfamiliar and long overdue. "I love you too, sweetheart," he replied, his voice breaking in that embrace. Years of silence and anger melted away. For the first time, Emily felt what she had always longed for. Not just a father's presence, but a father's love. What she didn't know was that this moment, this fragile reunion, was a gift that wouldn't last. The weeks after graduation blurred into a haze of summer sunlight and endless photographs. Emily's friends posted their family celebrations, online barbecues, road trips, proud fathers raising glasses and toasts. And though she smiled for the camera and joined the laughter, her heart remained anchored to that single embrace in the crowded auditorium. For the first time in her life, she had felt her father's love as something real, not distant. She replayed the moment again and again in her mind, the roughness of his work shirt against her cheek, the way his voice cracked when he told her he loved her. It was fragile, imperfect, but it was hers. But as the days stretched on, something gnawed at her. She hadn't seen him since that day. He hadn't called, hadn't stopped by the house. Each evening she checked her phone, hoping for a message, a simple, "How are you?" Yet silence answered her mom. She asked one night over dinner, "Have you heard from Dad?" Her mother hesitated, her fork pausing midair. He's been tired. You know, he's not well." Emily frowned. Not well? He didn't look great. But her mother's eyes softened, carrying the weight of something she hadn't said. "Emily, your father's been fighting an illness for a long time. He didn't want you to carry that burden. That's why he stayed away." The truth pressed against her like a weight. She remembered the tremor in his hands, the hollowness in his cheeks, the way he had struggled just to stand from the back row. She wanted to rush to him, to demand more time, more explanations. But before she could, the call came. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the phone rang. Emily picked up, expecting it to be Rachel or another friend. Instead, it was her mother's trembling voice. "Emily, it's your father. He's gone." The words didn't make sense at first. tumbling into her ears like a foreign language. Gone. She sank onto her bed, clutching the phone, her chest collapsing inward. The funeral was a blur of flowers, hushed voices, and the steady hum of grief. Emily stood by the casket, staring at the man who had been both absent and present. Distant and yet so deeply entwined with her heart. She wanted to scream at him for leaving, for never giving her enough time, for showing up only at the very end. But as she placed a trembling hand on the wooden surface, another memory surfaced, his voice at graduation saying, "Seeing you walk." Across that stage, it was worth everything. After the service, Emily's mother handed her a small envelope. Inside was a folded piece of paper, worn at the edges. In her father's shaky handwriting, it read, "Emily, I'm sorry for all the moments I missed. I wanted to be there for every game, every birthday, every celebration, but my body wouldn't let me. Please believe me, when I sigh was always proud. I kept every photo, every report card, every clipping with your name on it. You gave me strength on the hardest days. Seeing you graduate was my dream, and I got to live it. That was enough for me. Love, Dad. Tears spilled freely down her face. Smudging the ink, the letter was both a comfort and a knife. She finally had the proof of his love she had craved all her life, but it came too late to tell him she understood that night. Emily sat in her room, the diploma on her desk and the letter pressed against her chest. She realized her father's presence at graduation had been a final gift. One last act of love before he slipped away. And though the pain of regret burned deep, so did the memory of his smile in the back row. The silent pride in his eyes. That image would stay with her forever. A reminder that even love expressed too late was still love real, powerful, unforgettable. The days after the funeral moved slowly. Like walking through thick fog. Emily drifted between rooms in the house, her father's absence echoing in every corner. The chair at the kitchen table, once just another piece of furniture, now felt painfully empty. But among the grief, she found herself clinging to the letter. He had left her, carried it everywhere in her backpack, folded carefully into her wallet, tucked under her pillow at night. Each time she read his shaky handwriting, she felt his presence, fragile but enduring. One evening, Emily sat at her desk, her diploma framed beside her. She traced her fingers over the glass, remembering the way her father had waved from the back row. A thought came to her. He had been there, even when she couldn't see him. Maybe not in the ways she wanted, but in the ways he could manage. That realization softened something inside her. The anger she had carried for so long no longer felt as sharp. In its place grew a quiet resolve to live in a way that honored the love he had struggled to show. When college acceptance letters began to arrive, she felt the urge to call him, to hear his voice one more time. Instead, she unfolded his letter again and read his words. "Seeing you graduate was my dream. That was enough for me," she whispered aloud. "Then my dream will be to make you proud." At orientation day, standing among strangers in a new city, Emily felt a pang of fear. She reached into her bag, touching the envelope tucked inside, and steadied herself. She pictured him in the back row again, watching quietly, eyes full of pride. And though he was gone, she realized he had given her something more enduring than presence. He had given her a memory she could carry forward. A symbol of love that would never leave. For the rest of her life, whenever milestones came, first jobs, new adventures, challenges she feared she couldn't face, Emily would pause and imagine the farthest seat in the room. And in that seat, she would see him, silent but proud, cheering her on in the only way he knew how. The graduation seat, her father's seat, forever hers. Years later, when people asked Emily about her graduation, she never mentioned the stage or the diploma. Instead, she spoke of a single moment turning her head and seeing him in the very last row. It was not the picture-perfect memory of a proud father in the front seat, clapping the loudest. It was something quieter, more fragile, but infinitely more precious. That image became her anchor, Whenever life grew heavy, she closed her eyes and saw him there. Shoulders slightly hunched, smile faint, but real. Waving just for her. Times, the ache of what could have been still pierced her. She wished he had come to her birthday parties, to her soccer games, to all the days she had waited for him and gone home empty-hearted. She wished they had had more time, that she had said the words she'd been too stubborn to speak. I do need you. I do love you. But regret slowly transformed into understanding. She realized love does not always arrive in the form we hope for. Sometimes it comes late. Sometimes it hides behind silence. Sometimes it only reveals itself at the edge of goodbye. On the day she received her first job offer, Emily sat alone in her apartment, staring at the letter. She felt the rush of joy, but also the pang of absence. And then she smiled, looking toward the corner of the room where an old chair sat by the window. It was empty, of course, but in her heart, it wasn't. The graduation seat had become a symbol. A reminder that even love that falters, even love that arrives late, can still matter, can still heal. Years from now, when Emily would tell her own children's stories about their grandfather, she wouldn't speak of absence. She would tell them of a man who struggled, who failed often, but who found the strength to show up when it mattered most. She would tell them about the seat in the very last row, and how that seat, though humble, though quiet, was filled with more love than she had ever realized at the time. Because sometimes, one moment of presence can outweigh a lifetime of absence. And, though her father's chair at every future milestone would remain empty, Emily carried the certainty that in some invisible way, he would always be there, watching, proud, waving from the back. The graduation seat, the seat that would never again be empty. If this story touched your heart, maybe it's because each of us carries our own version of the graduation seat. Maybe it's a parent who wasn't always there, a loved one we misunderstood, or a relationship that left us with both love and regret. Emily's journey reminds us that presence doesn't always look perfect. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it comes too late, but that doesn't make it meaningless. One seat, one wave, one glance of pride, those small moments can stay with us forever. So today, think about the people in your life. Is there someone waiting for you to show up even? If it's not in the way you imagined, is there someone you've been holding anger against when maybe what they gave was all they had? Don't wait until it's too late. Say the words. Make the call. Take the seat in the back row if you must, but be there. And if you've ever had your own graduation seat moment, whether as a child, a parent, or simply someone who witnessed a quiet act of love, we'd love to hear it. Share your story in the comments, because when we share, we remind each other of something timeless. Love, no matter how flawed, is still love. And even an empty chair can hold a lifetime of meaning.